at the focus of our attention on the most important issues and be able to look for solutions. Mr. Prime Minister, therefore, I want to ask you, what is, in your view, the state of the world? It's a big question. But coming from political leaders' perspective, Mr. Prime Minister, what does this region mean, Asia Pacific, in terms of bringing the best to the state of the world, from your perspective?
Thank you, Tianwei. Should always start with easy questions, not the difficult ones. I'm familiar with Tianwei for a number of times, and thank you for this opportunity. It's an August Assembly and important players and role. You start with this question about the role of political leadership. There's a lot of this of trust deficit among political leaders, and you want a vibrant democracy and to promote development. Then the role of the private sector, captains of industry, becomes more pivotal, more relevant, more critical now than ever before. And APEC remains to be one of the more significant and has to play a dynamic role. There have been naysayers, negative perceptions, but I still believe APEC is like the Rock of Gibraltar. It has a role, it has to succeed, and this is one forum that we have the opportunity to engage effectively. I'm extremely pleased, for example, last night when President Biden made the reference looking forward to this engagement with President Xi Jinping. It's very important that we take a different view. The captains of industry, the business leaders must view this unlike the protectionist, limited concerns of many political leaders. Therefore, to my mind, we in the Asia Pacific look forward to this engagement because it would be an immense benefit to the region and to the world.
As we speak, the meeting, I guess, is taking place right now somewhere near San Francisco. So what do you hope, exact hope, let's just put it this way, that this meeting could bring to the discussions that we're having right now?
We talk about inclusivity. We talk about globalization. We have to accept that the global situation, geopolitics, has changed. And we in Malaysia, for example, in the region, do acknowledge that. China has a role and has to be engaged effectively. There must be effort, greater effort, to ensure that it is part of the global community. And well, there is competition, fair. But this engagement, for example, between President Biden and Xi Jinping, to me, it is critical because it should give a clear message that we are here to be able to work together and trust each other to resolve serious problems, climate issues in Ukraine or Gaza. There are too many contentious issues in the world, and you must try and engage, accepting the fact that you may not achieve all the desired results, but this engagement is important to try and establish areas that we can work together. Countries like Malaysia and ASEAN cannot be forced to see the world and the big powers in the Cold War mindset. United States, for example, being a traditional ally, has done an immense task in the early phase of development. The total investments and trade with Malaysia is led by the United States. But things are changing. There's increasing trade investment with China. So why then put us in the fix, in the zero-sum game? For the benefit of countries, emerging economies, and also for the West and the East, I believe that the solution is, of course, greater collaboration. And this Cold War mindset must end because the world in the post-normal times is more chaotic, more complex, and full of contradictions. It requires leaders with vision, with commitment, with shared ideals to be able to resolve it effectively.
And do you think your idea is representative of your colleagues from ASEAN?
Well, we have built some sort of consensus even among contentious issues like Myanmar. There are, of course, particular differences, but we all share the view that it must not be unjust, it must not discriminate, it must not continue with atrocities against your own people. So there is a 5-point consensus. There are absolutely differences.
Right.
Similarly, with the United States or China, there are different level of emphasis. But generally, we want to preserve the region, the most vibrant economic region, as independent. If I, in Malaysia, would use the term fiercely independent, to express our views, to share our concerns, but to accept the stark realities. The United States and the West remain a very important ally to us, and China is a very important trusted neighbor that would help in our attempt to propel the economy and ensure a peaceful, vibrant region economically.
Let's talk about the economy. Mr. Prime Minister, I know you and your colleagues have been working on that within your own country, but also looking at the region. We see some of the important trade mechanisms working extremely well in the Asia-Pacific region. CPTPP, for example, is one of those. And also we see RCEP as well. So how do you see these kind of trade mechanisms are helping us? And moving forward, we know the difficulties, but still, how can we maintain a certain level of stability and predictability? Earlier, you heard Mr. Morris coming from the business perspective, asking for that as business leader. So, Mr. Prime Minister.
I don't think we have a choice. We emerge as a relatively more successful country economically, Malaysia, registering 9-10% growth and even budget surplus in the 90s, because ours is a trading nation. Through FTAs those days, the more FTAs we have, the more beneficial it is for the country. Now with new mechanisms in place, we should fully utilize. That is why I say that, and I believe that countries must be able to engage more and accept the fact that a multilateral arrangement is more beneficial. And multilateral arrangement means that countries cannot be marginalized or discriminated for ideological reasons, for other reasons, issue hegemony, whatever. So that is my position, and I think most countries in ASEAN share this view.
Let's talk about some of the synergies among economies in the Asia-Pacific region. We see there's a debate about the so-called global north, so-called global south, but actually between the north and south, and even among the so-called south itself, there's tremendous synergy going on. I could put on the example between Malaysia and China, but of course that's only one of those many examples. So how do you see these kind of synergy that are already taking place, despite of the fact that we have difficulties geopolitically for the world?
I don't share a view of this bifurcation of contradictions. That's why I always stress upon the new realities, that the old mindset of the Cold War must end. It does not mean this just ended. Look at the COP28. What is our concern? The industrialized, rich countries committed to pay 100 billion and it's not forthcoming. So many other impositions for the emerging economies. And I think, to me, it's unhealthy. We need to, therefore, have an effective mechanism that we will not have this sort of division. Now, that's why I say I still maintain that the only way forward is to see us as one community. Climate change is not something peculiar to the West or the East. We all suffer immensely. And I even referred to the issues either Ukraine or Gaza. We all suffer. And these issues should not be allowed to further divide, to sow the seed of dissension. And we must have a common vision, including, of course, the private sector. I don't believe that, at least I see the new dynamics and narratives on CSR, on inclusivity, on justice, on better wages for the workers, on issues of climate. There are total concerns, and these are universal concerns. What we lack in politics, in business, in my humble view, is lack of humanity, lack of compassion. We compartmentalize people. We sow the seed of differences and dissension. And I think this has to change. I'm appealing to you to help this discourse, to present a new narrative. You can't depend only to the political leaders because they have been entrusted, and to a large extent, to some extent they have succeeded, but to a major extent they have also failed miserably. So we need now the new configuration where the private sector should play a more dominant and assertive role together with the civil society to make sure that whether you call it democracy or participatory democracy or people's engagement work. And I state my case.
But how would you be of support for that? We see countries different, one from another. When you are encouraging the business communities to engage more, of course, the business communities also have their core issues to work on. For example, how to make the business healthy. So the political leaders have to be accountable.
It's true.
And also has to be supportive.
Yes.
Providing the platform for everybody, including many of the brilliant business leaders here.
We should all be accountable. Business leaders too. You know, I've been quite unpopular in some of my remarks when we had to deal with this scandal, one MDB scandal. I said it would not have happened without the complicity of some international financial concerns, including, in that case, Goldman Sachs. So I think we all must have this humility to accept that things have to change and to acknowledge that we had some limitations. And on humility, you know, my standard quote is from T.S. Eliot. The only wisdom we can hope to acquire is the wisdom of humility. And humility is endless. So let us now accept the fact that in order to ensure that we resolve major outstanding issues of the world, from AI that we heard just now, to climate change, to poverty eradication, we have to make the necessary adjustments and accept the fact that even in democracy, you talk about democratic accountability. It's not just elections every 5 years. But so the accountability is not only among political leaders, but also business leaders and civil society leaders. And it is, in the Islamic tradition, interesting enough, one of the sayings and traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, which we learn from the early age, is that all of you are responsible and all of you without exception is accountable for your action and your deeds. Of course, the next question is, do people actually implement these principles?
Right.
The answer is, of course, no. So I think, Tenway, you are right in saying that we all should be accountable. We do more. For a government, like say Malaysia, what do? We have a Madani framework. There must be clarity in policies and to acknowledge the fact that the country cannot move forward without the involvement of the private sector, without foreign direct investment. So all possible avenues, including incentives, must be brought in to ensure that it's better employment and the rest. So with clarity policies, including energy transition, issue of digital transformation, this has got to be clearly laid down, and our task with the bureaucracy is to effectively implement this so that the private sector understand clearly what is to be expected from any of these countries.
Thank you. Mr. Prime Minister, I really enjoyed the quotes that you had from both the saints and the poets. Certainly, they are providing a lot of inspirations for us. But I still have to be pragmatic in my question. We are seeing the coming year, 2024, with many elections going on in the world. These economies, big, small, and yet there's always an issue of how political leaders are going to work on their domestic agenda vis-a-vis the state of the world. So being a responsible player. From your perspective, representing the political leaders, what are some of the important steps do you see that are crucial these days for political leaders?
Of course, there's an interesting quote from Churchill: the statesman thinks of the next, or plans for the next generation, a politician for the next elections.
Do we see more statesmen or do we see more politicians?
I think you need to combine both, Jan. Because you think of the next generation, you will lose the elections. You only think of the next elections, you condemn the next generation. So I think it is important to make sure that both of these concerns are met, that people do understand the vision, the policies, and political decision, however populist, cannot condemn the next generation. I am fortunate in this because we have secured a comfortable two-thirds majority in Parliament, and my election is another 4 years. So you expect very tough action and decisions I'm going to make for Malaysia.
I see you are talking from a very neutral perspective right now. Mr. Prime Minister, now we are at an important crossroad. Economies, whether they are big or small, or the so-called middle-sized economies, are all trying to strive with the circumstances they have to deal with. What do you think are some of the most important tools for political leaders like you to work with your business communities and also work on the economic partnerships with your friends and partners in the Asia-Pacific region?
Well, from my limited experience in the early period, in the 90s as finance minister, and now, I think political stability is very critical. But clarity of policies is what is required. Consistent, clear policies, whether it's energy or economic program or investments, etc. Then, of course, effective implementation. We all talk about ease of doing business. We all talk about one-stop agency. And I used to remind my bureaucrats, the one-stop agency does not mean that it stops there. You know, it means that you have to facilitate and accelerate the process with clear procedures and policies. And I think if that is done, I'm very fortunate, for example, from China, from the United States, from Europe, and also the region. We have established or record investments far exceed our projections. I mean, I'm talking about real huge. And this signifies a confidence in the private sector to the way we decide policies and we do business. My take, based on our past experience, is good governance. We must be tough on policies and tough against corruption and this way of doing business, squandering public funds to enrich those in power. And that is made very clear. I think we are on the right track to propel the economy in the country in the next few years. Very ambitious, and I think based on the track record in the last 6-7 months, we can achieve that.
Finally, before we go, we only have 30 seconds to go, Mr. Prime Minister. So, how political leaders like you and your colleagues to make sure that you are not being hijacked by rhetorics, but be able to focus on the real issue and responsible for the next generation, as you said, from Mr. Churchill, Mr. Prime Minister?
Yeah, it's not pious platitudes.
Yeah.
Because finally, you are judged by your action. People do give some allowance in the first few months, grace period, but then they will have to see whether you mean business. All political leaders, all opposition leaders come up and attain power by fighting corruption and abuse of power. The test is when you are in the responsible position, whether you can really deliver. The second, of course, clear economic policies. And you're right, because people become, that's why I started with trust deficit against leaders and political leaders, because the rhetoric, the pious platitudes is not met with concrete action. And thank you very much again. I need your support. Malaysia and ASEAN is the most stable and vibrant place to invest, and I look forward to meeting you individually in Malaysia. God willing, inshallah. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Prime Minister. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to see you again.
Good to see you again.
Join us in thanking His Excellency Anwar Ibrahim, Prime Minister of Malaysia.